The Dragon Clan, the most fearsome and powerful race to ever walk the continent. Masters of magic, their very existence is a nightmare to mankind. For centuries, the land has been drenched in blood as dragons and humans clash in a never-ending war. The reason? No one knows. But neither side is willing to surrender. Heavy casualties weigh on both sides, yet no one will give an inch. No compromise, no mercy, and still no victor. Even now, the slaughter continues. In the year 1733 of the creation calendar, humanity's greatest dragon slayer led an army in a daring assault on the Silver Dragon Clan. Their mission? To slay the Silver Dragon Queen herself. But in a shocking turn of events, the Dragon Slayer was betrayed by his own rival, captured and dragged into the heart of the Dragon Nation as a prisoner. The story begins in the heart of the infamous Silver Dragon Dungeon. The heavy stone walls echoed the sound of footsteps, as a powerful figure made her way through the dimly lit corridors. This was no ordinary visitor. Rosweiss, the Silver Dragon Queen herself, had arrived, her draconic tail swaying behind her like a silent reminder of her true nature, despite her human appearance. The two knights standing guard outside a certain cell immediately saluted with respect, but she swiftly ordered them to leave. She preferred to have a little chat with the prisoner alone. And who was this unfortunate soul? None other than the famed, great dragon-slaying hero, Leon Cosmode, who now found himself chained and battered, a far cry from the legend he once was. Rosweiss couldn't resist mocking him as she greeted him, her voice dripping with sarcasm. The mighty hero, once feared and revered, now reduced to nothing more than a prisoner of her dragon clan. But Leon, ever defiant, simply urged her to kill him, no longer interested in playing her games. Of course, Rosweiss wasn't about to give him an easy out. Oh no, she had far more sinister plans in mind. With a cold smirk, she trailed a sharp nail down his cheek, drawing blood, as if adding scars would somehow complete her masterpiece. But Leon, determined as ever, only asked her to end his humiliation quickly. If she was going to kill him, he pleaded, she might as well do it fast. Rosweiss, clearly enjoying his suffering, licked the blood from her finger, taunting him further. She knew he had been framed by some villain and wasn't in this position by his own fault, but that didn't mean she was about to show him mercy. Still, she made an offer. Join her Silver Dragon Clan, perhaps even enjoy a little redemption. But Leon, never one to back down from a challenge, responded with a sly smile, essentially asking her if she was even worthy of such a thing. Naturally, that struck a nerve. Rosweiss, furious, hit him hard enough to send him crashing into the wall, his chains shattering in the process. He coughed up blood, but she wasn't done yet. Before he could catch his breath, she stomped on his chest, reminding him exactly who held the power here. She took the opportunity to mock him further, questioning if he still fancied himself the great hero of mankind, the man who would one day wipe out the Dragon Clan and be celebrated for generations. Reality, she reminded him, had other plans. In fact, she gloated, not only would he die here like the loser he was, but he wouldn't even have any descendants to carry on his name. Pity, really. But even in this dire situation, Leon refused to break. He boldly told her that underestimating humans was a mistake, but the queen wasn't impressed. Instead, she wrapped her tail around his neck, lifting him into the air and choking him, amused by his stubbornness. Just when it seemed like Leon had no cards left to play, he spoke again, causing Rosweiss to pause. She thought he was about to beg for mercy, but instead, he pointed out that she had made two critical errors. Curious, she listened as he told her that her first mistake was being alone with the most powerful dragon slayer in existence. Her second? Tasting his blood. Before she could react, Leon's eyes glowed as he activated a forbidden technique, a blood curse. Almost immediately, Rosweiss began to feel its effects. Heat spread through her body, and she had no choice but to release him. Confusion flashed across her face as she wondered what on earth was happening. The hero, now back on his feet, coldly informed her that the curse would bring her pain at the very core of her soul. But then something unexpected happened. Rather than crumbling in agony, the queen lunged at him, pushing him to the ground. Leon, bewildered at first, quickly realized the curse had an unexpected side effect. It had awakened her carnal desires instead of inflicting pain. And as if to confirm his theory, Rosweiss kissed him fiercely. Things escalated quickly from there, and well, let's just say that what happened next wasn't exactly a duel. An hour later, as Rosweiss' mind finally cleared, she pulled away from him, demanding an explanation. Leon, still a little winded, revealed that the blood curse was a rare, forbidden technique, used only once in a lifetime. Whoever tasted his blood would form a soul connection with him, and when he died, they would suffer unbearable pain. He hadn't anticipated this particular side effect, though. Oops. Naturally, Rosweiss was furious. She wasn't about to accept this ridiculous explanation. If the curse only triggered after his death, then what the hell had just happened between them? Leon, clearly enjoying the absurdity of the situation, admitted it had all been an accident. He hadn't realized the curse's side effect would make the other person, well, excited? Yep, just a minor miscalculation. This did nothing to improve Rosweiss's mood, and Leon, ever the cheeky hero, began teasing her about dragon customs. Since dragons were monogamous, she was now stuck with him, bound by the curse. After he died, she wouldn't be able to take another mate or even have children. Worse still, she'd have no way to explain all this to her clan. Leon couldn't help but laugh at how well this had all turned out. Far better than he'd ever planned. That was the last straw. The queen lunged at him again, her hands glowing with magic, calling him every name under the sun. But even as she prepared to finish him off, Leon, ever calm, told her she didn't need to bother. He would die soon enough, and when he did, the curse would ensure she lived in torment. With that, Leon fell unconscious. But Rosweiss wasn't about to let him slip away so easily. No, if anyone was going to decide his fate, it would be her. She wasn't done with him yet. Casting a powerful spell, she left a glowing crest on his chest, ensuring that this wouldn't be the last time they faced off. Leon Cosmode had once been a name spoken with awe across the empire. He was a dragon-slaying legend. His rise to fame began early, at just 5 years old, when he killed his neighbor's vicious dog with his bare hands. This feat caught the attention of a renowned dragon slayer who happened to be passing by, and Leon was taken under his wing as an apprentice. By the age of 10, Leon entered the Imperial Dragon Slayer Academy, where he shattered records, graduating at 14 with the highest evaluation in history. At 15, he stepped onto the battlefield, slaying countless dragons and securing victories that seemed impossible, becoming the Empire's greatest hope. But now, the once mighty hero lay captive in the Silver Dragon dungeon. It had been 2 long years since his capture by the Dragon clan, and when Leon finally opened his eyes, he found himself in an unfamiliar, luxurious room. His mind raced. This certainly didn't look like any dungeon cell. As he tried to make sense of his surroundings, the door creaked open, revealing a little girl who gasped in surprise at seeing him awake. Leon, for his part, was equally shocked. This little girl was cute, far too cute for the kind of place he thought he might be in. In his dazed state, he began to piece together what he assumed was the situation. With his great deeds in service to humanity, surely he had ascended to heaven, right? And this adorable child? Well, she had to be an angel, or at least that's what his muddled brain concluded. But when he mentioned this idea aloud, the girl seemed confused, asking him what an angel even was. Leon, ignoring her question entirely, asked for her name. The girl, without hesitation, responded that her name was Mune, a name Leon found oddly fitting. Yet, something about this angel was off. Her hair was a strange mix of black and white, a color combination Leon had never seen before. Mune explained that her mother had told her the name meant moon, which made Leon's already jumbled thoughts even more scrambled. Angels had mothers? Leon introduced himself as Leon Cosmode, but Mune cut him off, stating she already knew that. She even mentioned that his name meant lion. Surprised, Leon asked how she knew such a thing. The little girl casually explained that her mother had told her. Leon felt an ominous shiver crawl up his spine as a realization began to dawn on him. Hesitant, he asked who her mother was. Mune's innocent reply was like a punch to the gut. Her mother was Rosweiss, the Silver Dragon Queen. Leon's heart sank, and his thoughts raced at breakneck speed. Was it possible? Before he could fully process the information, Mune delivered the final blow, innocently confirming that yes, Leon was indeed her father. The hero, the slayer of dragons, sat there, utterly dumbfounded. He couldn't fathom that the little girl standing before him was his child, the result of that cursed encounter 2 years ago. And then, as if summoned by fate, Rosweiss herself entered the room. Mune happily ran to her mother, announcing that her father was finally awake. Leon noticed, to his dismay, that the little girl had a dragon tail just like her mother. It wagged happily, a stark reminder of the truth he wished he could deny. Rosweiss, flashing a wicked smile, greeted him with the same mocking tone she had used 2 years prior. Mune, in her childish innocence, mentioned that her mother had visited Leon every day while he was asleep, something Rosweiss confirmed, though Leon couldn't bring himself to believe it. The queen then asked Mune to leave the room so she could have a private conversation with Leon. Once alone, Leon, still reeling, asked if Mune really was his daughter. Rosweiss, with cruel satisfaction, confirmed that the little girl was indeed their biological child. Leon, horrified, demanded to know why she had kept the child and why she had even bothered to save him after everything. He knew she hated him, there was no doubt about that. Rosweiss coolly reminded him that he had been unconscious for 2 years, and did he really think she would let him off the hook after what he had done? Leon, flustered, quickly blurted out that what happened between them was never his intention. They were too different. They could never coexist. He would have never touched her if circumstances had been any different. But this only seemed to amuse Rosweiss more. She began teasing him, asking if being with her had been such a torture. Leon, mortified, confirmed it was. In a sudden move, Rosweiss used her tail to knock him onto the bed and started crawling toward him, her intent clear. Panic set in as Leon asked what she was planning to do now. Without a word, she tore his shirt open, revealing his bare chest, and then cast a spell by pressing her finger against his skin. A dragon pattern began to form, spreading like a brand. Rosweiss sneered, asking what his fellow humans would think when they saw him marked with a dragon tattoo. Would they still see him as the great dragon-slaying hero, or would they brand him a traitor who had surrendered to the dragons? Leon gritted his teeth, struggling to keep his composure, and asked why she would go so far. Her answer was simple. She wanted him to live in shame for the rest of his days, humiliated and subjugated by her. The dragons had always been known for their twisted sense of revenge, a concept that was beyond human understanding. Rosweiss saw it as an honor to have broken Leon, the greatest dragon slayer in history, and made him her slave in every sense of the word. For her, this was the ultimate revenge, one that would burn deeper than any blade. To add insult to injury, she climbed on top of him, seducing him, and much to Leon's horror, his body began to react against his will. Give them some privacy. 24 hours later, at the Silver Dragon Castle, 2 maids were busy gossiping as they went about their tasks. They whispered excitedly, remarking on how the queen, Rosweiss, seemed to be in an especially good mood today. The reason, her husband had finally woken up. Little did they know the very person they were discussing. Our boy Leon Cosmode was eavesdropping from a hidden corner, and boy was he shocked. Leon could hardly believe what he had just heard. Rosweiss had announced to the public that he was her husband? The thought sent a chill down his spine. He couldn't help but recall their recent activities, and the queen's insatiable nature during their time together. He had to admit she was terrifying. She'd kept him busy for a whole day and night, nearly breaking his waist in the process. Damn, bro got some serious stamina. It was enough for him to swear, then and there, that he would never stay and become her plaything. Trying to calm his racing heart, Leon began analyzing his situation. For dragons guarded the side door, escaping through there was out of the question. But as he surveyed the area, something odd struck him. Why were there so few guards today? 2 years ago, when he was first brought to the Silver Dragon Castle, the place had been crawling with guards. The quiet, almost eerie atmosphere unsettled him. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he spotted it, a hole beneath one of the walls. A tunnel, and tunnels meant one thing, escape route. Sure, it could be a trap, but at this point, Leon didn't care. He had to get out no matter what. Even if this was a setup, he'd rather risk it than stay another minute. So, without further thought, he crawled into the tunnel, hopeful that this would finally be his chance to leave the queen behind. As Leon made his escape, he briefly thought of little Mune, the daughter he'd unknowingly fathered with Rosweiss. Despite her cuteness, he decided it was best to leave her with her mother, for now. Little did he know, Mune had spotted him from afar and had already reported to her mother. Rosweiss, lounging nearby in a swimsuit, casually remarked that she had seen him too. With a sly smile, she praised Leon, calling him awesome for trying to run. Mune, brimming with excitement, eagerly asked her mother when they were going to fish him back. Rosweiss, crouching down to her daughter's level, gently corrected her. You can't say fish him back, sweetie. That's rude. Surprised, Mune asked what she should say instead. The queen, still amused, told her, you can say catch him back. Meanwhile, Leon was sprinting through a dense forest, his eyes fixed on the distant mountains. If he could just climb over them, human territory would be in sight. Freedom. The thought kept him going, but then, a shadow passed overhead. Leon's stomach dropped. He looked up to see Rosweiss, now in her dragon form, soaring towards him with terrifying speed. But Leon wasn't about to give up. Gritting his teeth, he pushed himself harder, running as fast as he could. From above, the queen teased him, calling him quite the runner. Within moments, she landed gracefully in front of him, blocking his path with a smirk. "This is fun," she said, clearly enjoying the chase. Then, to Leon's dismay, she revealed that she had been the one to help him escape in the first place, distracting the guards and leaving that convenient hole for him. Of course, Leon wasn't surprised. He had suspected it was a trap from the start. He just hadn't expected her to catch up so quickly. Rosweiss then asked him what he thought would happen if he returned to human territory, especially with the dragon mark now branded on his chest. Did he think they would still see him as a hero? Would the mighty dragon slayer still be revered, or would they cast him out as a traitor? Leon, ever defiant, shot back, "If they don't accept me as a dragon slayer, I'll just live as a regular person. Anything is better than staying here and being tortured by you." Hearing this, the queen clicked her tongue in irritation. "You don't know how to appreciate kindness, do you?" she muttered, grabbing him effortlessly. With a few powerful beats of her wings, she took off into the sky, carrying him along despite his protests. After 3 hours of complaining and yelling, Rosweiss finally descended near the Empire's border city. She dropped Leon unceremoniously onto the ground. Leon, groaning from the impact, scrambled to his feet. He looked around, wondering if they had really arrived at a human town. Landing gracefully, she shifted back into her human form and confirmed with a nod. But Rosweiss wasn't done with her mind games. She pointed out the human border, visible in the distance, and asked if he truly believed he could just step over and return to his old life. "It may look close," she said with a knowing smile, "but you can't go back." At that moment, the dragon mark on Leon's chest began to glow, pulsing with heat. Rosweiss grinned wickedly as she explained, "I forgot to mention, when one of us wants to be intimate, the mark reacts. You should be feeling it now." Leon's face turned pale as the heat spread through his body. His skin burned, and desire bubbled up uncontrollably. Despite the overwhelming sensation, he managed to grit his teeth and ask through ragged breaths, "Do you want to do this here of all places?" "Oh, absolutely," she purred. "I wanted you to understand true shame, standing so close to your hometown, yet unable to cross over." Leon, his chest heaving, clutched at his mark, trying to fight the urge, but it was too much. Even so, he wasn't willing to surrender so easily. Grabbing her arm, he glared at her and declared that he would patiently wait until the opportunity came for him to repay her double for all the humiliation she had caused him. Rosweiss, momentarily surprised by his defiance, quickly recovered. With a sly, sarcastic smile, she leaned in close. "I'll be waiting for that day, Leon, whether you come at me dead or alive." Despite all their constant bickering, Leon and Rosweiss somehow ended up doing it again in that very spot. The queen, pleased as ever, watched Leon, who was silently shedding a few tears, and mentally noted how delighted she was with his performance. In a teasing manner, she pondered the idea of bringing him to that same place for a visit each month. That cheeky suggestion finally stirred Leon from his misery, and he immediately thought to himself that she was a dragon with her head lost in the clouds, dreaming about how she was going to drain him dry again. Instead of getting upset at his mental jab, Rosweiss found it amusing, silently admitting that he had seen right through her. She then decided it was time to head back, mentioning to Leon that their daughter was waiting for them at home. Just as she began summoning her wings, preparing to shift into a hybrid form, Leon's stubborn pride kicked in, and he quickly stopped her. There was no way he, a renowned dragon slayer, would allow himself to be carried off like some helpless prey. He would walk on his own 2 feet. "Thank you very much." The queen, ever the one to humor him, gave a knowing smile and reminded him that while she could make the journey in 3 hours by flight, it would take him 10 days, maybe even half a month, if he insisted on walking. But Leon, as headstrong as ever, insisted that human endurance shouldn't be underestimated. "It's just 10 days, no big deal," he thought to himself, determined not to back down. Rosweiss smirked, obviously entertained, and decided she would enjoy watching him struggle. Sure enough, not long after, Leon began showing signs of fatigue, barely able to hide his exhaustion. The queen, never missing an opportunity to tease, offered him help should he no longer be able to walk. Naturally, Leon's pride was stung by the suggestion, and he firmly denied needing any assistance. Rosweiss, unimpressed, simply muttered to herself that the only thing tough about him was his mouth. Things took a turn when they heard the distant sound of marching feet, and soon enough, the Dragon Slayer army came into view. Leon's spirits lifted for a moment, and he briefly entertained the idea that maybe these soldiers could help him shake off the queen once and for all. Unfortunately for him, Rosweiss's palpable killing intent quickly shattered that hope. If Leon dared to call for help, she would end them all without so much as a second thought. As the army's captain approached, Leon tensed up. The man, Walker, seemed friendly enough and asked if the two of them were lost. Leon, however, couldn't afford to let the situation escalate. He hastily thought it best to wave off the concern, assuring the captain that they were simply hanging out, even though the last thing Leon wanted was to hang out with a murderous dragon queen in a dangerous forest. But Walker didn't seem entirely convinced and went on to offer them a ride, mentioning that the forest was filled with dangerous creatures. He introduced himself as the captain of the 47th Squadron of the Imperial Dragon Slayer Army, which immediately set off alarm bells for Rosweiss. Leon quickly tried to de-escalate the situation, politely declining the offer while thinking to himself that the last thing he needed was for Walker to get any closer to them. To Leon's dismay, the captain approached them anyway, squinting as if trying to place Leon's face. He mentioned that Leon looked familiar, which immediately put Rosweiss on high alert. Her hands were already crackling with mana, ready to strike at a moment's notice. Leon, realizing how dangerously close things were to going south, decided to take a bold step. Thinking fast, he pulled Rosweiss into a sudden embrace, holding her close in a very uncharacteristic display of affection. He awkwardly assured Walker that he just had a popular face and that even his wife, who he was currently holding, often mistook him for someone else. Meanwhile, he quickly whispered to her that he would return with her willingly if she just helped him get rid of the soldiers. Amused by his sudden shift in behavior, Rosweiss went along with the act. Walker, now thoroughly convinced they were just a lovey-dovey couple, chuckled and told them he wouldn't interfere any further, urging his men to move along. As the army disappeared from sight, Rosweiss, clearly irritated, wondered aloud if he had hugged her long enough. Leon sheepishly let her go, thankful they had avoided a deadly confrontation. Rosweiss, however, wasn't done lecturing him. She remarked that while he had made the smart choice not to involve the soldiers, he needed to remember his place. Just because they had a child together didn't mean she was his wife, and she made that point abundantly clear, raising her voice as if to make sure he didn't miss it. Leon, in response, could only click his tongue in frustration. Being her husband had never crossed his mind in the first place, and he made sure to convey that through his thoughts. Rosweiss, still fuming, decided it was time to continue the journey. Unfortunately for Leon, before they could move on, a sharp pain suddenly shot through his left hand. Upon inspecting his palm, he noticed a strange wound on his hand. But before he could process what it was, his vision went black, and he collapsed. The queen, hearing the sound of him hitting the ground, glanced back with a mixture of annoyance and amusement. Leon, a fragile human as always, had passed out. With an exasperated sigh, Rosweiss released a bit of her aura before transforming back into her dragon form. Without much effort, she scooped up Leon, draped him over her back, and flew off. As she soared through the sky, she decided that, just this once, she would take his collapse as a plea for mercy.
To be continued. If you want to watch the next part, then like and subscribe and let me know in the comment of what recap you want to watch next.